After putting up with my marginal satellite-ready coax system in my RV for 2 years, I decided that once and for all, let's see why this thing isn't working correctly. So I ran a coax directly from the antenna outside through the seal in the slide out right directly into the back of the receiver. And guess what? Perfect reception. And for the manufacturer installed satellite-ready coax, it begins here in the wet bay at that connector.
So first the coax goes down to the base and through to the other side. Then the coax goes from this side all the way down, loops around behind the slide out, then back up into the slide out, and then up to the outside refrigerator. Then when I remove the outside refrigerator, I get to the pedestal that the refrigerator sits on. And when I remove that pedestal, I see where the coax wiring comes from, and then it goes through the slot into the backside of the fake fireplace.
And I have removed the electric fireplace. This is the void behind it. And the gray cable goes from the bottom all the way up through the top here, like that. And then the next stop from the fireplace is behind where the stereo is, and there's a gray cable. We got a splice. Why do they put a splice there? And from this point on, all I had to do was follow the existing cables all the way up to the top cabinet. And here's another handy little gadget. This is a wireless Wi-Fi enabled camera, and you can see I've got my iPhone here, and it's wireless Wi-Fi. And boy, these are really convenient for looking inside things, finding where things go. So I would highly recommend getting one of these if you don't have one. They're not that expensive.
And so I made a graphic of the cable route. We start out in the wet bay with a wall plate. We go across to the curbside of the RV, down the frame, and then loop a couple times for slack for the slide out. And then from the slide out we go back up towards the front underneath the outside fridge, and then we go in behind the fireplace to the stereo where we have another barrel connector, and then we continue to the top of the cabinet where we have another wall plate. So including the wall plates, we have 3 barrel connectors in this coax. So now that I know the route that the manufacturer used to install the cable, and while I can't see it in all places, I can look through the cable and see if I can find any issues. But before doing that, I pulled out my homemade time domain reflectometer, or TDR, and TDR'd the cable to see what it looks like, and here is what we see. We have a couple really bad reflections in here, and we are getting about a 50% loss in the 30 foot of cable, which is far too much. And I also have a video on how I built the TDR, and I'll provide that link here in case you'd like to build one. Whenever I run across these low quality barrel connectors, I'm replacing them with higher grade ones, like the ones you see here. And if you do the research on the internet for the high-grade F81 barrel connectors, they typically have blue insulators, or sometimes they're green or orange or red. But they're all kind of the same. They're high-grade connectors that are satellite certified. You'll also find those that claim that the connector color does not make a difference in the attenuation of the signal. Well, it is not that they are different colors. It is that the different color designates a higher quality barrel connector, because the dielectrics are different in the higher quality ones and they don't have as much loss. And for proof, here's a spec sheet from Belden, which is a respectable company, for an F81 type connector. And if you scroll down, we have a 0.2 dB up to 1 gigahertz and a 0.25 dB up to 3 gigahertz insertion loss. So those are better than the standard connectors, which are closer to a half a dB. So yes, there is a difference with the blue connectors. And although I could not find a spec sheet showing the loss of a standard barrel connector at the satellite downlink frequencies, my research through the internet plus my TDR research, I'm going to feel confident with saying that they're about a half a dB loss per connector. So just in the 3-barrel connectors, I have 1.5 dB of loss. So what's that really mean? What's 1.5 dB? Well, if you look at this chart, 1.5 dB is about 30% loss. So just in those 3 connectors, I'm losing 30% of my signal. And I went through and replaced all 3-barrel connectors with the high-grade connectors, tightened every connection, and made sure that I didn't have any real sharp bends. I TDR'd the cable again, and look what I have now. I've got a much better looking cable. I do have a little blip where the slide out is, but you know, that's to be expected. But then I had to go ahead and ruin it all by moving the slide out, and wouldn't you know it, now I've got a bigger blip. It's not severe, but it's significant. This means that the slide out is stressing the cable so much to the point where it's actually altering the characteristics of the cable. And my fear is it's only going to get worse as time goes on. Plus, this TDR also shows me that I'm still getting some pretty significant loss, and that just has to do with the 30 feet of cable. And you can see here is the coax from the slide out over to the main chassis. So every time the slide out operates, this goes in and out. And there is flexible rated coax, but it's 3 times the cost of regular coax. So I doubt they used any of that stuff. I'm going to replace the coax with some standard RG6 quad. And as I show here, I'm going to have a wall plate on the outside for the connection to the antenna. A 10-foot run of coax that's going to follow basically the same path in the slide out that the original coax did. But for the receiver, I'm just going to connect the end of the coax right to it without a wall plate. So I'm actually removing 2-barrel connectors and 2 coax connectors, reducing the length from 30 feet to 10 feet. And I'm not going through any slide out mechanism where the cable is going to be stretched. So in the long run, this is going to be the best solution. And like most of my projects, I have a companion web page that details all this information at rvproject.com. And this is a graphic of the outside portion of the cable run. I have an outlet that goes to the rear of the slide out mechanism. It's the only place I could find where it wasn't going to get hit or damaged, or I had to bend the coax too sharply and that kind of thing. And then I drilled a hole through the bottom of the cabinet. And if you recall earlier in the video, I showed where those cables went under a tray that the refrigerator sat on. And then through the slot that's on the opposite side of the fireplace, shown by A. And then on the inside, we go through the entertainment center, again, starting at A, behind the fireplace, up behind the stereo, behind the TV cabinet, and then exiting at the top where the receiver is. Now, those of you that are keeping track, this is for a Grand Design 29RS. So if you're going to do a project like this, obviously you have to figure out the route in your coach. And the location that I chose for the wall outlet was at the bottom rear of the slide out. And I made a little discussion plate so that it looked a little bit nicer, and just installed it using standard practices. And as well, on my webpage, I do have a Front Panel Express template for this panel if you decided you'd like to have one. And so now we have the discussion plate secure, and I even put a little cap on here to keep the water out. And the conclusion, of course, is this was a worthwhile project. My satellite is working fine, and so that's about what I expected to happen.